Resident Evil is the most iconic horror video game franchise. Since 1996, this franchise really put the survival horror genre on the map, and since 2019, Capcom began a trend to remake and bring back the older games of the series. The franchise made history again with the release of Resident Evil 2 Remake. It really recreated the 1998 classic with modern graphics and controls and managed to maintain the original experience. But we're not here to talk about remakes. We're here to talk about the latest entry in the franchise, Resident Evil Requiem. But I just brought up Resident Evil 2 because it's related in more than one way to this game, as we'll find out. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Only Thing Gaming channel. Resident Evil Requiem is the 9th mainline entry in the franchise. It was first announced at Summer Game Fest 2025, and honestly, I wasn't much excited about this game, until they revealed in the Game Awards 2025 that Leon Kennedy, one of the iconic characters of the series, was making a return in this one. After that trailer, this game got my full attention, and it became the second most anticipated game in 2026 for me, only after GTA 6. I played and finished Resident Evil Requiem, and I'm going to review the game, breaking down every small detail this game had to offer. So, let's dive into it. The narrative follows the FBI agent Grace Ashcroft as she investigates murder crime scenes in the Wrenwood Hotel, where her mother was killed 8 years ago. And when she gets there, she finds a very cliché key and room number. Seriously, what's up with horror games and using keys with room numbers? We've seen this in Resident Evil, Alan Wake 2, and Silent Hill 2 Remake. Anyway, Grace meets Dr. Victor Gideon, who explains to her that he's waiting for her and she is important for Umbrella, and kidnaps her. Meanwhile, our second protagonist, Leon Kennedy's investigation leads him to the same place where he sees Dr. Gideon as he carries Grace. Leon tracks him down, and the events of the game really start from there. The narrative sets a good tone by involving Leon as early as possible and manages to introduce Grace in a very accepted way. As soon as I played the prologue, I was intrigued to find out more about Grace's relationships to all of this, what her mother hid behind the painting, and how Leon connects to all of this. The narrative also introduces other new and returning characters like Emily, a blind girl who sits in a closed room. Emily, with her closed room, book, and the empty room next to her, adds an extra layer of darkness, depression, and sorrow to the story. Or the returning Sherry from Resident Evil 2 and getting her involved with Leon. Also, the narrative shows how far Leon Kennedy has come since he was just a rookie. We see how he drives his Porsche and uses advanced tactics to get through every situation. One of the boldest moves he did was handing Grace the Requiem, his strongest gun, as he gets trapped inside the care center. That's just confidence. And of course, Leon wouldn't be himself without his one-liners and references to Resident Evil 4.
You know, I do have a question. When's the last time you brushed your teeth?
Leon, I've been trying to reach you.
Sorry, I was a little tied up.
It's Leon. Sorry I couldn't get in touch sooner, but I was a bit tied up.
Grace's character doesn't feel much like an FBI agent. She stutters when she talks and shivers when aiming a gun. And to be honest, that's perfect. Her character feels real and authentic. Any real person in her situation would be scared and unsure of what to do. Also, this makes Leon look and feel even stronger and highlights how experienced he is. The game doesn't spoil any of its upcoming events. It even hides the speaker's name in the subtitle. I liked how the game calls Leon the investigator when he first shows up, even though it's obvious who he is. The narrative doesn't provide path A or B, which means you can't play Grace's sections with Leon or vice versa. This really served the pacing of the narrative and made both Leon and Grace's footsteps easier to track down and follow up with. unlike Resident Evil 2's different paths, which made finding the canon path confusing as some of the endings don't add up with the others. However, some of the character switches happen during important scenes that would have been better if they weren't cut by the other protagonists. A clear example of this is the second to last time the game switches from Grace to Leon. Of course, I won't show it to prevent spoilers, just look for it after you finish the game. I also liked how the game includes smart actions. One of the examples is seen when Grace opens the door and hides in the same room to outsmart Dr. Gideon. This move was brilliant, and it was one of the moves I always wonder why characters don't use in horror games or even movies. However, the narrative also had its weird and silly moments, like that moment when Grace asked Emily if she can see when the answer was obvious.
Is someone there? Oh, I'm sorry if I surprised you. Cataracts. You can't see, can you?
Or the cliches that happen in every RE game, like helicopter crashes or self-destruct buildings. Before we move on with the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Gameplay in Resident Evil Requiem mostly follows the usual Resident Evil formula. As soon as I started to play this game, I switched to the third-person perspective. I wouldn't say that a certain perspective is better than the other. I generally like the third-person perspective in most games. With Leon, the game is set to third person by default. However, Grace's default perspective is the first person. I believe Grace's levels were optimally designed to be played in first person. Even some cutscenes are taken from a first-person perspective. In the third-person perspective, she trips and falls while running. This doesn't happen in first person, but she feels kind of heavier and slower. This really adds balance to both perspectives and prevents the abuse of switching to get an advantage. The game dives into two different subgenres depending on the protagonist in play. Leon Kennedy's gameplay adds the action flavor, while Grace's gameplay leans more into survival horror. With Leon, the game is kind of forgiving, but Grace's resources are more scarce and should be used effectively. She can get rid of attacks either by moving fast or using knives to escape zombies. Leon can parry attacks, and let me tell you, parries are physically broken in the game, and I mean that in a good way. Leon can even parry RPG missiles. Grace's gameplay amplifies the horror not only by introducing her as a weak character, even jump scares are more present in her sections compared to Leon's. The game's inspirations from RE4 didn't stop at parries for Leon. It also included melee attacks that can be performed on stunned enemies even when playing as Grace. Leon's gameplay also has its own mechanics, like the ability to use the environment to his advantage. He can throw weapons back at enemies, use the chainsaw, perform finishing moves using the walls if the enemy is close enough, or use mortars to take down enemies. The level design was brilliant. The way the game connects different rooms and distributes key items around the map was really intriguing. Like most Resident Evil games, backtracking is strongly present in the game, and each character has its own locations to visit with the exception of the care center and the last area in the game. In the care center, the game cleverly puts loot that can only be accessed by Leon, which really balanced this location between him and Grace. Examining items is not a new thing in the series. It has always been one of the satisfying ways of reading files or opening small boxes, and Requiem is no different. Location variety served the game really well. The game had much to offer when it comes to locations. Streets filled with normal NPCs, the care center, the empty and destroyed Raccoon City, but for me, the best locations were RPD and the orphanage. I like when games throw you back into previous locations that held meaning to the whole series. Seeing how these locations changed yet they're still familiar are really some of the most special moments in the game. Leon returns to the place where everything began for him was also my return to the place where everything began for me, because I became a fan of the series since Resident Evil 2 Remake back in 2019. Puzzles in the game are in most cases mediocre. They're really easy and not completely new to the series. Most of them are solved through collectible files that reveal safe codes or passwords. And speaking of collectibles, Mr. Raccoon dolls also return with this one, and some of them are really hidden well in sneaky places. You can track them down by hearing their sound. Leon's puzzles are mostly solved by shooting. Loot crates, breakable items, and ladders are painted by yellow to hint the player to shoot them to create a path for Leon. One of the puzzles that really stood out for me was the prison puzzle with Grace. It reminded me of RE2. The map offered limited help, and being chased by the giant girl pushes the player to plan his moves carefully and try to stay away from the dark. The map is another advantage the game provides for you. It helps you plan out your path and reveals locked doors, collectible items, and points of interest. However, hardcore fans might not like the map as it offers too much help. For me, I don't like having to memorize rooms and locations, so I really liked having a map. The map became a necessity when moving through the larger open area of Raccoon City. Boss fights were few, but that's to be expected because the game is short. The game brought back a lot of elements from Resident Evil 2, including the Tyrant boss fight with Leon, which again shows how far Leon has come. A final boss in Resident Evil 2 is just another step for Leon in RE Requiem. Enemy variety is good compared to the limited amount of time I spent through the game. They mixed up new enemy types with returning types. There are normal zombies, quick zombies, zombies with different weapons like chainsaws or knives, and there are larger, stronger enemies like Chunks, Singers, and the Chef. The game also included Crimson Heads, or Blister Heads as Requiem calls them, enemies that can mutate twice, which makes them faster and more aggressive. They help the game by making backtracking much more dangerous. This variety made encounters a lot more strategic and require you to pay attention to each situation and keep track of each enemy's weakness. The game even adds to that variety by adding different mechanics like the motorcycle level with Leon or carrying Emily with Grace. Stealth is also incorporated into the gameplay of both characters. With Grace, you can use hemolytic injections to instantly stealth kill enemies, while Leon can just use his hatchet. For Grace, the injections are limited, so they should be used effectively to take out stronger enemies, but Leon can just sharpen his hatchet for free. He can stealth take down enemies whenever the opportunity presents itself. The game takes that into consideration with its level design. Some areas with Leon are built for a possible stealthy approach, while other times the game can prank you by hiding enemies in certain corners or making trapdoors like this one. Grace's stealth is not always about taking down enemies. She can clear her path by drawing them away either by turning on the lights or throwing breakable bottles. Crafting returns with more advanced mechanics. Grace uses the blood collector to collect infected blood, which is basically her currency. It helps her craft ammo, healing items, and hemolytic injections. You can even craft items before adding them to the inventory, which is really convenient when you don't have the space to pick them up. You unlock more crafting formulas by finding different samples and solving small puzzles. Grace's upgrade system is really straightforward. Pouches increase inventory space, steroids upgrade her health, and stabilizers upgrade her aiming and bullet damage. Leon's upgrade system is more like RE4's shop system. You collect credits by defeating enemies or collecting them throughout the game. You can use them to upgrade weapons, buy completely different weapons, or upgrade your briefcase, which is necessary because unlike Grace, Leon doesn't have an item box. Charms also return from RE4 Remake. They give certain buffs and you can activate them by either attaching them to your weapon of choice or just having them in your inventory. I'd say the game time is really balanced between Leon and Grace. The first half of the game is mostly around Grace with small sections for Leon, while the second half is mostly Leon with small sections for Grace. The game increases its realism even further with its visuals and animations. Characters grab the flashlight with their cheek if both their hands are busy. Their hair and clothes can be stained with blood and dirt, and they check their weapons when pressing reload while they're fully loaded. These small features made the gameplay even more immersive. All of that said, the game had its downsides. One of the most obvious downsides was the punishing checkpoint system. Dying or failing a certain section almost always throws you way back, which was kind of annoying, and I'll admit it made the game longer for me. Not only because of restarting certain sections, but also because of frustration. Most of the time when I reload a checkpoint, I just choose to stop and return to the game later. Another one of the downsides was the hit detection. Some of the missed shots felt like they really should have connected. I'm not a professional speedrunner or anything. I really can't tell if missing some shots was my fault or the game's fault, but something feels off. Also, one of the things I really don't like in horror games is not having the ability to separate a weapon from its ammo. Grace gets 2 handguns in the game, and I wanted to switch to the better one, but the old one had 7 bullets. The game can easily include the ability to take those handgun bullets and reuse them as you see fit, but for some strange reason, I never saw any horror game include this feature before. Also, I would have liked if they included the ability to play only Leon's sections or only Grace's sections after you finish the game, but that could be a future update. Resident Evil Requiem is powered by RE Engine. And while this engine isn't quite perfect with open world games and bigger areas, it's perfect for the Resident Evil games. After all, it was called RE Engine for a reason. The game's visual details are truly impressive. The visuals take every aspect of the game to a whole new level. Whether you're walking the NPC-filled streets, or walking through dark alleys, or exploring the darkest of places, or even seeing the destroyed streets and buildings of Raccoon City, the characters' skins, hair, bloodstains, and dirt help the immersion even further. The game's visuals are just amazing, unless you're playing the Switch 2 version. But seriously, the visuals even made the gore and violent moments of the game even more intense. What I mostly like about the Resident Evil games is that they're always well optimized. PC system requirements are reasonable and the game doesn't force ray tracing or other options that might hurt the performance on lower to mid hardware. I was very happy with the visuals even though I didn't use anything near ultra settings. I'll just show my settings, PC specs, and some performance benchmarks I recorded while playing the game. If you're not interested in those, make sure to jump to the timestamp on the screen. As you just saw, the game stays around 70 FPS in open areas, 90 FPS in closed areas, and around 70 again with combat. As for ray tracing, If you have an AMD or a mid-range Nvidia GPU, I'd say the sacrifice in performance is not worth it. But if you have a high-end GPU, it might be worth a shot. With that said, the game isn't perfect. I encountered some minor stutters. They mostly happen when you enter a room or turn on the flashlight for the first time. Clearly there's some shader compilation happening in the background. I wasn't planning to even talk about those stutters because they're so minor, but I decided to mention them as I was writing this review, just in case someone wanted to know. For me, despite these minor stutters, the game was technically close to perfect in both visuals and performance. Resident Evil Requiem instantly became one of the best games I played in 2026, and even though it's still early in the year to say that, but trust me, I've been around long enough to know special and enjoyable games when I see them. It might not be the best game I will play in 2026, but it's definitely on my top games list this year, and it's most likely going to stay there. I enjoyed the game and found it pretty special. I like how Resident Evil recreates the same cliches and keeps the same formula, but manages to change certain variables and factors to make the players love it every single time. I stopped giving number ratings on the channel, so I won't do that with Resident Evil Requiem. I'll just say the game was worth the wait, the ending was satisfying, the game referenced old RE titles and hinted at future titles. If you're a long-time fan of the series, definitely pick it up. If you're not familiar with the series, I don't recommend starting with Requiem, but what are you waiting for? With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.